Previously in part 1 of this video, I posed the question, and of course proposed some vehicles myself which I thought fit the bill, of what you think the most OP car is in all of Gran Turismo. Something which ideally punches well above its weight, it's just consistently ridiculously good in virtually everything you use it for, ideally that you can use it for quite a few different things really, and certainly across multiple different games. And of course there was no real way of ranking this sort of thing because it's such a personal, subjective experience for each of us, and even in terms of ranking them based on comments and votes, it very quickly devolved into not being able to do that. I will say though that we do have a clear winner, by far and away. There is a winner as to what the consensus of you believed was the single most OP vehicle from Gran Turismo's history, and of course we're going to get into that one, as well as, and this is something I wanted to do as well, mentioning a few really good picks that people made, especially vehicles which are good across multiple games, and some of which I can't believe I actually forgot myself. First up, a fantastic call was the HPA Golf. Of course that's one of my favourites back from Gran Turismo 4. The fact that it's not in all of the games obviously doesn't help too much, but it was a very, very good call, and the games which it is in, it's basically the fastest hot hatch in the game, and it's a supercar level machine, and get very early on in the game if you play your cards right. The next one is one I can't believe I forgot. Again, not featured in many games though, so that doesn't help its case. The game it is in is fantastic though, the Honda HSV10. This one was massively popular. Every time someone could use it, you would see this one and stuff like the GTR Stealth in so many different lobbies. The next one was curious to me because this had more mentions and more support than I would have thought. In fact, it's one of two Lotus models which had quite a bit of love. The first one was the Esprit GT, the Esprit V8, the Esprit Sport 350, and that kind of surprised me. I don't recall using the Esprit too much myself, or even hearing people talk about it that much, but I guess more of you love it than I thought. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't an overwhelming amount of love, but it's definitely an interesting choice to put out there. The next one was mentioned multiple times by multiple people and had some really good response in terms of actual comment replies and likes as well. The TVR Cerberus LM race car. I must admit again, I barely, if ever, used back in GT1 and 2, but I definitely hear a lot of love for it, so that is a really, really strong pick. Of course, not being featured again after that point doesn't really help, but it's still, much like the Honda HSV10, a really strong vehicle. The next one's a fantastic choice as well, the Light Car Company Rocket. Such a good pick, and I'd totally forgotten about it. Not exactly featured in a huge amount of games. I do believe, and of course we re-reviewed it here using this footage in fact, in GT6 relatively recently, because it is one of those cars that I do think they probably could, if not will, bring back. It's one of the relatively few cars of such a low power level to be capable of those kind of speeds, as well as being a phenomenal track car. The next one's a cool pick as well, probably not a car which we'll see back anytime soon unfortunately, the Mazda Furai. Yes, this was a beast, and it had so much less power than its main rivals like the Ferrari FXX and the Pagani Zonda R. Very, very cool pick. I didn't use it as much as many people did, but I do kind of miss it now that it's gone. It was great in Forza, it was great in Gran Turismo, and consistently extremely OP in both games. It was technically a concept car, kind of a supercar, sort of a racing car, and almost a Vision GT before that was a thing, but all put together, yeah, pretty awesome car. The next one was another very, very popular pick, and this one definitely is one of the cars which I would say, in terms of just sheer volume of inclusion in the series and how consistently good it is, particularly for road cars, yeah, it is a strong pick. The Mitsubishi 3000 GT or the GTO. From road form to race form, multiple different eras, variations, newer versions with the fixed headlights, older versions with the pop-up lights, American market, Japanese market. It's a really, really strong all-round car. Yeah, very, very solid all-round pick. Another really solid pick that was called out by multiple people, definitely a good one as well in multiple games, even more recently, the Amuse Honda S2000 GT1. That, for a road car in particular, is a strong pick. In GT4 it was great, then in GT5 I didn't personally use it much, but I'm sure it was very popular as well. I kind of joined GT5 after the servers had already shut down for the online stuff. GT6, solid pick, and of course now you're getting into the territory where you've got a couple of different ones. You've got the premium version, for example, and now of course full premium glory, some visual upgrades. Definitely a very strong choice, fantastic looking car. The next one is a car which is very close to my heart because it's actually my favourite Group C car of all time, and also the most powerful Group C car of all time in qualifying, but I didn't include it on the list because despite the fact that it is literally the most powerful, so the most OP in real life, in the game I don't find it to feel that way. Some people definitely do, but I always found it fairly well matched against stuff like the Minolta and the Pescarolos, etc., and that is the Nissan R92 CP. Don't get me wrong, I adore the car. I absolutely love this car, but OP, I think it's a fine line. I think it's as good as you'd expect it to be, and it's as fast as it should be. Whether or not you describe that as being OP, I think is where you can get into the weeds a bit. Definitely not a bad pick. The next one, much like the Amuse, is a really good choice as well. I was actually surprised to see the amount of love for this one, particularly in the older, kind of middle ground Gran Turismo games like 4 and 5. The Opera Performance S2000. Much like the Amuse, a vehicle which it seems many of you use to kind of carve a path through career mode. Again, I didn't use it much, and of course we replicated it in special projects in GT7 not too far back, but yeah, it's interesting to see how much love this car actually had. The next one, to go back to Lotus, another good call, one of my old man's favourite cars, the Lotus Elise. It was kind of just a blanket thing that a few of you mentioned, liking the Elise in general. Some said the 111R more specifically. There were a couple of racing versions as well, which to be honest I'd totally forgotten existed in the franchise, the older shape and the newer shape. And yeah, of course, Lotus Elise, it's kind of the blueprint for that kind of car. The Vauxhall, the Opel, they're great as well. But yeah, the Lotus is kind of the OG in that world, or at least it's the one which many of us would think of first. The next one, I don't understand how I forgot it, because across GT 4, 5 and 6, which is where this car really had its showing, it really was a legend. This was such an OP vehicle. It was easily up there with stuff like the Suzuki GSX-R4 and the light car company Rocket, and I'm surprised with that in mind that I didn't see more people mention this one. The Honda NSX-R LM road car. Talk about a ridiculously OP vehicle. The race car was fine, but the road car really was something else. It even looked better as well, which was pretty awesome. Next up, much like the R92CP, this is one which I mentioned, but I didn't actually put on my list. Many of you disagreed though and thought that it should have been there, so we're definitely going to mention it now. And again, it's not hard to understand why. Of course, the Toyota GT1. The road car, you could argue even more so in fact, because that is a hell of an advantage to have, and unlike another vehicle which is going to be on the list in a second, you can actually justifiably call it a road car because it was intended for that. The next pick also had a lot of love, which is really nice to see because I absolutely love this car. I didn't include it because I didn't think as many people as apparently do would find it to be OP. It is, again, strictly speaking, the definition of overpowered. In fact, in real life it was legendary for being too powerful, but in the game I would have thought the handling would have put a lot of people off. I am of course talking about the legendary TVR Speed 12. It is certainly one of the most iconic cars of the entire franchise. I would say up there with stuff like the GT1 and the Escudo, but I'm surprised how many of you seem to get a lot of use out of the car. I thought this car always scared a lot of people off, or just wasn't really good enough through corners for many players, but apparently not, because yeah, it is a hell of a machine, that's for sure, and I really hope we see it back in future. And this is another quick reference for the Forza coming to PS5 news. Well, if you are a Speed 12 fan, it's in the game, so if you haven't played Forza Horizon 5 yet, that's yet another car to look forward to, because yeah, it's ballistically quick. The next one was a more recent pick in the comments, and just like the NSX-R LM, I'm kind of shocked that this one didn't have more love. This one mostly though had a very narrow band of being OP. I would say by far it was the most OP in Gran Turismo 3 specifically, which is when we saw a red version featured, and then afterward it was only featured in yellow. In GT4 it was pretty good, but it had immediately been neutered compared to what it was before, and it's always been OP, literally speaking, being like a 900 horsepower car for no apparent reason. I am of course referring to the wacky Gillett Vertigo. I am surprised more players didn't say that one. It is kind of the sort of car you could maybe forget about, which is understandable I guess, but yeah, much like the NSX-R LM road car, it is a hell of a thing, and I remember again my old man used to use it all the time in Gran Turismo 3. It was borderline unbeatable in GT car territory. Going back to the point of being a road car that I said about the Toyota GT1, some of you will have already known which car I was alluding to, because again, I don't know how I forgot about this, the Ferrari FXX. And this one is OP mostly on a ridiculous technicality. A technicality which it shares with a few other cars, but the FXX should simply not be allowed into road car events. Yes, I'm aware that companies like EDO Competition have made road-going versions, but that isn't the version in the game, and Ferrari didn't sell it as a road car, so it should not be allowed as such. The fact that it is ridiculous, but certainly comes in very handy. It's a hell of a car, it's ridiculously quick, looks great, sounds great, it's great through corners. This is a car which I would actually pick more often than the Tommy Cara ZZ2, and if those of you who have clicked on this one without watching part 1 are wondering where the hell the Tommy Cara is, that is one of the cars which was in the first part. The next one was a fantastic pick, and I can't believe I forgot about this one either, because this is an OP vehicle which was OP even in GT Sport, and in GT Sport there weren't many OP vehicles. This was one of them though, the Mazda RX 500 concept. This car might be more OP in GT Sport than any other Gran Turismo game, because very few, if any, cars could match this down around 200 or 300 horsepower. It's a beast of a car, particularly for top-end performance compared to its power level. In GT7 even. Still a great little car, in GT Sport more so, especially as a cash cow, and in GT6, I don't recall if it was in 5, I don't think it was, but in GT6 it was also very good, maybe not quite as strong, but yeah, that's at least 3 solid games that it was really, really good in. So I am surprised more people don't have nostalgia for that, especially given how recent of a car it was. You'd think it would be more in people's minds. And last, but definitely not least, a really good choice, which I think goes even beyond what was said, and that is the Porsche 911 GT3. I think that is possibly the best pick of this entire list, because if you think about it, the 911 GT3, and this is a question I want to pose to you all, this might seem like a really hot take, but I would like you to think about this and give me your thoughts in the comments. Do you think we've reached the point in Gran Turismo where, because of Porsche becoming so much more of a thing, whereas it wasn't at all before, roof, sure, but it's not the same, do you think the Porsche 911, racing, road, kind of rally, if you tune them, rear-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, classic, new, turbo, GT3, active aero, crazy engine swaps, do you think the 911 is the new GTR? Because to me it's always been a fantastic rival to the GTR in real life, but I kind of feel like in the older Gran Turismo games it was the R34 that was kind of the poster child, then the R35 from around Gran Turismo 5 for obvious reasons, but I feel like the 911's kind of taken over that, because the GTR, sure, the Nismo is great, the facelift is great, but you know what to expect. There's the whole familiarity breeds contempt thing, it's a bit long in the tooth, starting to feel a bit big and a bit heavy considering how quick other cars are. It's still very, very good, but the 911 kind of feels like it's punching harder and faster, like the GTR used to be. So I would love to pose that question. Do you think the 911 might be the new overall poster child of Gran Turismo now? But of course that brings us to the number 1 pick. What car do you think won? Well, you might have noticed if you suggested this car that it hasn't been mentioned. By far, we can officially crown, at least for our little community here on YouTube, our little slice of Gran Turismo, the vehicle which you picked as the single most OP car in all of Gran Turismo through a couple of different name changes, a couple of changes in terms of being four-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive if I recall correctly, and spanning at least the first 6 games, and it hasn't been featured since. The Mitsubishi FTO LM race car. That's a hell of a pick. Even the road version, as I've said many times, curiously missing from the newer Gran Turismo titles, not even a premium version in GT6, in fact, it was a semi-premium. But in particular, the touring car, and even more so the LM version, was by far and away the clear winner from the comments in that last video, not just in terms of how many of you brought up the car, but how many of you voted or upvoted those comments as well, in terms of replies and liking them. So now we can kind of say, fairly definitively in fact, that as far as our community here on the channel, the favourite track for many of you in the whole series is Grand Valley, and the most OP car from the series for many of you is the Mitsubishi FTO LM, or touring car, or race car in a general sense. Many of these were very well supported as well, and if you thought, as I said, that some were missing, like the Escudo, etc., it's only because I'd already talked about them in the previous video, and many of you did support those same ideas. Massive love for the Escudo, the 2J, the 787B, plenty of others in that video, so if you haven't watched part 1, be sure to do so, and of course if you are new to the channel, stick around for plenty more Gran Turismo content. But I'll see you again in future, probably with another discussion-based 2-parter like this one, so stick around for that, and thanks for watching.